podcast. We are here with Haven, Clint, Ellen, and I'm Lane. And today we're talking about soul ties. So if you don't know what that is, just hang tight because we're going to talk about it in just a second. But of course, I have an icebreaker first. Okay, so I want to hear you guys' favorite songs. Don't sing them. Just tell me what they are.
Oh, I was fully prepared. Mine is actually Gangsta's Paradise. And I'm not even kidding. I love it so much. I want it played at my funeral.
Okay.
And I'm dead serious.
At your
Yes.
funeral?
Okay.
I feel
You're
like
dead
it kind of...
Dead serious? Get it?
No, but actually, I feel like it really encompasses who I am as a person.
Oh.
But I feel like my reality of myself is different from others.
That's the truest statement I've ever heard in my entire life.
Thank you.
I don't know what mine is. Haven, what's yours?
Okay, I had to find it. It's Shake
You
the...
had to write it down?
No, it's just on my phone.
Oh, okay.
On Spotify. It's Shake the Frost by Tyler Childers.
Is it Childers or Childers?
Childers.
I think it's Childers. I hope
Alright,
it's
that's
Childers.
I was
That's
just
what
asking
said.
for other
Gotta say
people.
it's
I wasn't
country.
sure.
Imagine you're saying it as country as you can.
Yeah.
And like
Childers?
Childers.
doesn't sound country.
Childers.
Sounds
Tyler
like country.
Childers.
Childers.
So at least the way I figured that you should say it.
Well,
Okay. Yeah.
my favorite song is Valerie by Amy Winehouse. But I asked you guys. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, nice.
I love her. But I asked you guys that because I kind of based this podcast, at least in my mind, off of a song that we will link below, but it is called Soul Ties, and it's by Young C. It is a Christian rap song, but just hear me out. Just hear me out. You gotta listen to the lyrics, okay? And it'll just, everything will make sense. But anyway, we could just jump right into Soul Ties from that because I don't know how else to go off of a Christian rap song. So obviously, the definition of soul ties, a lot of people don't know what it is. I didn't know what it is when I first heard of it.
I didn't know until yesterday.
Yeah. So let's start with what comes to y'all's mind when you think of soul ties. Like, what is your definition? What have you settled on it means?
An unhealthy relationship. Like a like unbalanced relationship. I guess.
Right.
I would say it kind of looks like an obsession with somebody or something, like Clint said, in an unhealthy way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just like a special connection you can have with somebody, just really close to them. I feel like it could be used in a healthy way or in an unhealthy way.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think I came to the conclusion that, I mean, usually if we're calling it a soul tie, it's probably something negative because you're
Yeah.
not going to call it like a good connection
Yeah.
that. But I think it's just like, yeah, like a connection to somebody really closely. I mean, even like beyond the aspect of emotional, like even physically, like you produce like hormones and stuff when you get close to a person. Like if you spend a lot of time with somebody or if you trust them, like you just respond in a different way. Like you trust them more and everything.
Yeah.
But I do have the Urban Dictionary definition, just a little part of it. It just said a spiritual/emotional connection you have to someone after being intimate with them emotionally or physically. And then it even went as far to say when you want to be rid of them from your mind and your life, even when you're far away from them, you still feel as if they are a part of you. Which I thought that's where you kind of get into the negative connotation of soul ties.
Yeah.
Is like, it's not, you wouldn't call it a soul tie until it's an issue that you can't separate yourself from them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a bad thing for like in the context of like when I'm away from my wife, I miss my wife.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Like it's not a bad thing. When you're away from someone you love, you miss them.
Right.
So like that makes sense. When I hear the word soul tie though, I think of like someone who is like latching onto somebody.
Yeah.
You know,
I
as
agree.
opposed to both are willingly coming
Yeah.
together.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. And I think like you were saying, like it can be a good thing. Like if I've like legitimately committed to somebody, like you were saying, like marriage or something, like then a soul tie can be a good thing. Like, you know, like obviously God made our emotions and everything for a reason. Like they have a purpose. It's just like then when you go tying your soul, whatever, like that kind of thing, to people that you don't know if you can trust, like that kind of stuff, then that's when it becomes an issue. Because like you were saying, like you're latching on to something that might not be like glorifying, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think we're kind of getting into it. But what about soul ties relates to the Christian life? Like what about this can be found in the Bible? Where do we see examples of soul ties?
I think we see one in Ephesians where it's talking about husband and wife and how they're united as one flesh.
Mm-hmm.
But I was looking up on the Google whenever Haven told me what we were talking about. I'm like, what is a soul tie?
Yesterday.
Was that an autocorrect? But so I Googled it, looked up some stuff on YouTube, and I actually found that there are several places in Scripture that talk about where souls are bonded and souls are tied together. Bookmarked them in my handy-dandy Bible app. One of them is in 1 Samuel 18:3, and I feel like this is a good example of like a healthy soul tie, and it's talking about David and Jonathan's friendship. And it says, "Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul."
Yeah.
So that's one place we see it, I feel like. And then another place that we see it is in Genesis chapter 42, verse 38, talking about Jacob and his son Benjamin. And that's like this long story about the story of Joseph. And but something that Jacob says is, "My son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead and he's the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow." So he's basically saying, if my son were to die, I would die with him.
Yeah.
I feel like that's an unhealthy example of a soul tie.
I think that's how close we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I wrote down also, like you were saying, the one flesh. I had First Corinthians 6:16, and it's referencing something in Mark 10, but it's saying the two will become one flesh. So I kind of put that in under like physical soul ties, because I think soul ties can be physical, emotional, like all of the above. But I'd also put, because there's a quote from the song, that I talked about, the Christian rap song, where it was saying, it says, because she's not used to having somebody around, doesn't know how to spend her alone time. And I think that's when soul ties get dangerous. I mean, that's what scares me the most, is like thinking about relying on somebody and then not knowing what to do when they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
That's when it gets dangerous, I think.
Well, and that's why it's so important, I think, too, for, like, it's a mutual thing. It's not, like, when you love somebody and, like, having a healthy relationship, it's like you both love each other and you both care about each other. You're not, when it's in an unhealthy way, like, the girl doesn't know how to act if there's, like, not somebody around. It's like, it becomes more, like, selfish. Like, what is this person, can this person do for me?
Yeah.
What are you
How
getting out of it?
me feel? Like, what am I getting out of
Yeah.
it? And when that's gone, they're like, oh, well, what is there? Like, who am I?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think, especially for people who, like, knowing God and knowing how God calls me to rely on Him, I think I view it a little bit differently than somebody who doesn't know that aspect of God. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, I can at least acknowledge, like, that, yes, I need that support and I know where I'm supposed to get it from. But when we're talking, like, in the world, like, not understanding that aspect of the love that God has for us, like, then you don't even understand why you feel tied to a person. Like, you don't even understand, like, why am I relying on them, or am I supposed to? Who am I supposed to rely on? And I think that's when it's like grasping at straws. You know, you're like, you feel a need and you're just going to find the first person that can fill it. Like, I feel the need to rely on something or somebody, so I'm going to do it to the first person who will be that for me. I think that's when it gets so, like, scary, like, watching my friends, especially those that don't know God, that I can't even talk to them about that aspect of it, because how can you talk to somebody about something that they don't believe in? So when you watch them do that, it's like, I wish I could express to you, like, I know what you need. Like, I know what you're feeling, and how do I express to you that you're doing it in, like, a dangerous way, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and that's why we believe as Christians, like, we are, whenever I think about stuff like this, I always like to go back to Genesis. It's like, okay, how did God create us? And literally in the garden, in perfection, like, in this perfect state, God said, well, Adam was feeling alone. He was like, I need a helper. And so that's when God created Eve, created the woman. And it's like, I don't know, we are made for a deep connection with somebody. Like, that's how we're designed. We're designed to be in relationship with people. And there's a special, like, that is especially unique in a husband and wife relationship. it's a deeper bond than like any other bond.
Right.
And people don't understand. Like it's also as special and beautiful as it is. It's also dangerous.
Yeah.
If you're jumping at that first person.
Yeah.
And you're like giving them everything you got, and that's why it
Yeah.
hurts so much. Is because you give yourself away completely, and then you don't get any like that love isn't there in return.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think like when I was looking into what exactly makes a soul tie so like dangerous, like because like you were saying, I think that it can be something like good, and it can almost be like something that you can give to a person, like when you get married, like giving them that close proximity to you, like emotionally and everything, like that's something that you have and that God gave you for a reason. But I had wrote down, it's also a song quote, but he had said, but the flesh is never satisfied. And then I was trying to find it in scriptures because I wanted to make sure, like, you know, Proverbs 27:20 says people's eyes are never satisfied. And I think, like you're saying, that's when it gets so dangerous, giving a person all you have, and then it's never going to actually fulfill you. Like, that's what leads to, I think we see a lot of in culture, and again, this is like not just physically, I think it's the first thing that we think of, but also emotionally, like we see so much in culture, like going from significant other to significant other, like you're always dating somebody, or you're always going from really close best friend to like you fall out and you find another really close best friend. And I think it's because like you're looking for that satisfaction, but like I said, like if you're going off of your flesh and what your heart says, like you will never actually find it. Because it can't be satisfied.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I also think whenever we're talking about like the physical aspects of a soul tie, there is marriage. There is that intimacy that comes with marriage, or in the not good way before marriage or on the outside of marriage. But I feel like physically, and I think this just comes to mind because I'm a mom and I have a child, like I carried 2 children. Like I am physically connected to those children forever. And even if I didn't carry those children in my body, like as a mom, you're still connected in that way. A father is still connected to his children in that way. And I think our souls are meant to be tied together in that way. But I also think we're called to show our children, whether they're biological or not biological, that void that they have, that they're always going to want to fill with something, belongs to God. Like through our own lives, show them like we're connected to our spouse. I'm connected to my kid's father, but they're going to have a void that their wife will be able to fill, but the ultimate void is filled by God, and it's not even a void. It's their entire life. So in that way, you can be connected to somebody, and that's one of the good ways. But not in the way of like Jacob and Benjamin of, if my kids were to pass away, tremendous heartbreak. I don't even want to think about that grief. But I don't want to be so tied to my children that I feel that I need to die if they were to die. Does that make sense? I feel like I kind of went on a rabbit trail, but
No, I agree. And I think, Haven, you had mentioned something earlier that I didn't even think of when I was looking at it, like trauma bonds. Like, I kind of want you to talk about that if you can, because I think it is a way that we react to things, and it's not, it doesn't have to be just trauma, but like you were talking about, like when you tie yourself to a person, you react like in a magnified way compared to how you would react to just somebody you know and you haven't like accepted that emotional responsibility for.
I don't think you choose to have like a trauma bond with somebody. It's just like it happens, and then you subconsciously like choose to be with that person because you have that bond, or because you went through something together. And usually after that, it's hard to let go of them because you know all that they've been through and like how they overcome it, and just like they know all about you, so it's just kind of hard to let go.
I think that like really ties into what I was trying to communicate with like the emotional aspect of soul ties, because again, like physically is the first thing that I think of and the first thing that a lot of people think of, but emotionally it is like, I don't know, I always think of people giving advice like in terms of dating, at least that's what's like most relevant to people like teenagers our age, is like you don't want the person you're dating to be who you rely on for all your advice. And, like, I'm going to tell them all the trauma going on in my life, and we're going to carry the weight together. Like, that's meant for a marriage.
Definitely.
You know?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, like, even if they didn't experience that with you, if you're sharing all of it with them, your body and mind is going to react as if they did experience it with you.
Yeah.
And then what if that relationship doesn't work? Like, you know, we're like 17 and 18, and I can't say with confidence that whoever we're dating now is who we're going to be married to. I don't think really anybody could.
Yeah.
And if you can, then why is there not a ring on it? You know So it's like, yeah, like maybe I could say I really like them, but I can't say with confidence that that's going to be the outcome.
Yeah.
So it's like, then how can I also say with confidence that I can tie this big event in my life or this big feeling that I have to that person?
Yeah.
That it's never going to be my own. Like, you know, like, you're accepting that as part of your testimony. And sometimes that's good. Like, that can be really good. But it also, you have to acknowledge it is going to be really hard to let go of.
And here's an inescapable truth about relationships and about particularly dating relationships and romantic relationships is that bond, like, you do not move forward emotionally without feeling a tug to move forward physically. Your emotion, we as beings, we're talking about our soul and like soul ties and who we are. You are, there's physical, emotional, and spiritual.
Yes.
Those are these three segments we divide ourselves up into, and each of those things are bound together. Yeah. And so if you move forward with somebody emotionally, you're naturally like going to want to move forward physically and want to move forward spiritually. And if you build a relationship with them in either one of those three categories, the other two are going to want to catch up.
Yeah, that's good.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's also an unhealthy place to be when those two things are feeling pulled, you know? And you're like, oh, we can't do that physically because that's definitely sin. But that emotional thing you did with them was sin as well. And we don't realize that. We don't put that together. It's like those three things are tied together. And if you try to do one without the other, it's going to cause pain. Yeah.
Definitely.
I think this might just be like a teenage girl thing, but like I cannot not think about like how hard a breakup would be, and like even if like I'm like, oh, I really like this person, like it's always gonna be in the back of my mind like how would a breakup play out, like that's just always gonna be like preparing for the worst, I guess. And all I can think of is like, holy cow, like I would be terrible with, I've not had to experience like a hard breakup, but like I would be terrible with it. And then if you add on the weight of having like an actual soul tie, like something outside of my tangible control, like my mind and body reacts to that person differently. Like, I don't know. I can't even imagine going through that, especially somebody who doesn't have God to go through that. Like,
absolutely.
That's what's so scary about watching my friends, like I said again, like watching my friends go through these relationships where like they're like playing pretend married couple. And it's great, and they are really happy in the moment, and it's hard to be like, oh, this is wrong because they're so happy in the moment. But then it's like that breakup has crushed them. Like I have like really close friends, like one of my closest friends that went through that. Like her and her boyfriend of almost like 2 years, it was like they were married, like they were together all the time, like it was a lot. And then the breakup like crushed her for a long time.
Absolutely.
And of course, because like, you know, she had her mind and everything, like her emotions were conditioned to react to this person, to this guy like he was a husband, you know, like, and God made us to react that way, but the commitment wasn't there. You know, I don't know.
Fire is great when it's in the fireplace.
I
know, I don't know if that's been said on this podcast before,
but
I feel like it has. But fire is great when it's in the fireplace. But when it's on the rug in the living room, it is not great. It's burning the house down. Like it spreads. You know, it's so the fire is for the fireplace. And that's what's happening right now is we're playing with fire. When we start getting into these kinds of relationships with people. Fire's great in the fireplace.
I feel like
it gets anywhere else in the house.
I feel like people think that soul ties are normal, and they don't know. Like after a breakup, they'll just be like, "Oh, I kind of feel like," like I don't know. They feel like they use it as just being like attached, and they're not used to it. And then they just like they say that they're moved on, and then they get with somebody else, and then they have another soul tie, and then it just like all adds up, and they think
Yeah.
it's normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we're designed as God's creation to have relationship with people.
Yeah.
We're designed to feel sad whenever we break up with somebody, and we're designed to feel happy when we're in the presence of somebody that we truly love. But there is a reason that God said in the confines of marriage, confines, is that the word?
Confines, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
You said it correctly.
In the confines of marriage, that certain things can occur whenever you're married, because when you're not, then when you do experience those breakups, it's like, oh, I'm sad, but I can move on.
Yeah.
You don't have that soul tie. But
Yeah.
when you're married and you are biblically, spiritually tied to that person, you don't have that. You don't have to fear the heartbreak that comes with a breakup, because
Yeah.
it's like,
Absolutely.
I'm with this person forever. I'm
Yes.
tied to this person forever.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's the way it's designed to be.
Yeah.
Yep.
I saw it was something talking about, and I also feel like this is an unavoidable topic for like, especially now, because I like half my friends, their parents are divorced. Like it's just
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
that you have to think about. Is like I saw somebody talking about, it was a Christian talking about like, divorce rates are so high and whatever, and you know the culture that we're in now, where like you said, like we're making soul ties and we're breaking them. Like you're getting
Yeah.
emotionally or physically close to a person.
Yep.
Every time your mind and body reacts to you breaking that connection, you're conditioning it to
Yep.
think that's okay.
Mhm.
Yes.
So then when you are in a marriage and you feel even the littlest tug at that tie, your body's like, okay, break it off. Like,
Yeah.
like
gonna break
that's
easily.
what we've done in the past. That's what we're going to do again. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's being tugged at, so break it off. And then, you know, the whole idea of like getting out of that marriage doesn't seem as detrimental if it's not the first time you've been tied to a person so
Yeah.
closely.
Yeah. Well, even think about, I'm a very image driven person. You think about like a hair tie,
Yeah.
and you think about its use. The first time
Yeah.
you use it, super strong. It holds your hair back really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take it out of your hair. And then you put it back in your hair again, and it's a little looser. Yeah, Clint doesn't know about this. But you take it out of your hair, it's a little bit looser. And it's like every time you use that hair tie and discard it and try it again, it's weaker
Yeah.
than it
It's not
originally
strong.
was.
Yeah.
And so you want to be able to give everything to one person,
Yeah.
but you also want to be at your strongest whenever
Yeah.
you're with that person. You don't want to be so physically and emotionally and mentally beaten down that you're just giving them like, the best that I have is this brittle tie that I
Yeah.
can give you. That's not going to help you. That's not going to help them. That's
Yeah.
not going to help you in the long run, the short run.
Yeah.
So you want to have a strong hair tie,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so to
That's
say.
good.
And I think that the one thing that I definitely want to make sure we end with is like that there is like redemption in all of that.
Oh,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
because like even hearing this now as somebody who is not like, I haven't gone through that. Like I've been very careful to not have to go through that kind of stuff. Like even hearing it as somebody who, again, like I don't struggle with that, it is like discouraging. Like it's hard to think about, you know?
Yeah.
But there is redemption in it. And I want to make sure like that is what we end on. But something else I had written down, also song quote, was said, you're dimming your light. And I was saying like risking your own faith. I think that's what scares me the most also, especially with emotional soul ties, because that is the easiest one to not realize you're doing, especially as a Christian. Like, at least for me and with like the friends that I have in this church, like we all know like physical limitations, like what we're called to in our faith, like physical limitations. I mean, definitely still struggle with it, and that doesn't mean you're not going to slip into it, but like the emotional limitations is when it's a gray area.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think what scares me the most is a lot of times you want to fix somebody. And like the song was saying, like you dim your light in the process. Sometimes like, you know, evangelism dating is a thing and that it works out sometimes, but I don't think anybody will advocate that like they evangelism dated and it didn't at least like put some weight on them or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like you are dimming your light. And for that time,
Always
like,
a bad idea.
yeah.
always
Yeah.
a bad idea.
Yeah.
Does not go well.
Yeah, I think that's
When you're talking about like redemption and stuff, my brain just went to Jesus can give you a new hair tie.
Yes.
Like-
yes, he can.
Even if your hair tie has
His
been
hair
broken.
tie was the crown of thorns,
Sure.
and it's redeemed
Oh,
and
Lord. You're taking that.
Rose.
You're taking an analogy
I
away
know.
from-
That's what I do. You give me something, and I'm just like, let's take it as far as we possibly can.
Wait till the thumbnail for this is Ellen holding a crown of thorns. Like, here's a hair tie.
This is
Jesus'
Jesus's hair tie.
Oh my
I'd
God.
have so much fun with that. Okay. No, I agree. I think the redemption part is like what you have to consider the most, because I can guarantee that half of the people listening to this have at least emotionally experienced this whole time, or experienced just getting close to somebody and it being difficult to let go of. But one more song quote, because I think what makes it so difficult is there's a song quote that says, you gotta let it go, but every time you say you're about to, you get back into your feelings. And I underline feelings because I think that, like we were talking about, emotional soul ties is where it gets so difficult. Because again, even if you are in a relationship where you're like, okay, yeah, like I shouldn't be in this relationship, I can't fix them, that's not my job, but you're already emotionally connected to that person. Like, even if you haven't crossed some line or something, like, you've already committed to that. And like, that's what's so hard, is it becomes like a cycle, you know, like, be like, no, I'm gonna do it. But,
Yes.
I feel like that's the most common, and like everybody's experienced that. Even people who aren't Christians have experienced like being in a relationship that they know is not healthy. Like I had this friend a while ago, literally broke up with her boyfriend I think 6 times.
Oh.
And just every time she's like, well, maybe, and I don't blame her, like, at all. Like, it is hard, and
Absolutely.
we're teenagers, like, why, like, it's almost like we don't know any better, you know?
Well, that's also why you can't rely on your feelings.
Yeah.
And there's some sort of, there is a scripture that like associates your heart and why. Can't think of it right now.
Your heart is deceitfully wicked. Who can know?
Yes, that one. You can't rely on your feelings, and that's why you have to be able to, in a relationship, take a step back and look at it logically. Is this healthy? Am I becoming obsessed with this person? Is this person at the forefront of my mind in an unhealthy way when I should be thinking or using my time to talk to other people, do other things? Am I constantly thinking about this person? And I think that's where it can start to become unhealthy, is because that initially is not a sin. Thinking about somebody like just constantly is not a sin. But when that thought drives you to do other things, that's where the sin comes into play. And that, like you were saying, the emotional side is a slippery slope. So
well, there's a difference between thinking and obsession too.
True.
So it's like when he or she is all you can think about, like that's when it crosses a line there. And it's I was just thinking about that verse. That's why I was so quick with it. I was like, the Bible talks about this. Like, feelings are difficult. Like the heart is deceitfully wicked. Who can know it? Like the Bible is telling us, hey, no one can figure this out. Like you can't figure out how your feelings are doing. You know, like, so that's why you need to be so careful. And like you said, take a step back and think. Don't feel. Think about it. Don't like look at what's going on and process it. Don't just go in there based on your gut feelings. Because that's just going to lead you to, it's maybe won't, but almost always probably will lead you to a bad place if you don't think about it. You know?
And I think that's why discernment is also so important, because you have to be able to discern, is this of God or is this of the flesh? Like, in order to do that, you have to take a step back. Like, you can't just, I'm going 100% heart fully in and that's it. That's all I'm taking with me is my heart. You can't do that, because then you're just going to hurt yourself and other people. So
I feel like that verse like follows me around all the time when I'm making decisions. Like that's
good though.
It is.
Maybe you should get that tattooed.
Oh, maybe.
Or don't.
You know,
it's
do
okay.
a podcast about tattoos. That'd be great.
I have one.
That'd be great.
I think we should. But what I was saying about that verse is like, I feel like I think about that all the time, because it is so scary, because everything about our faith is going against our intuition and going against what our mind and heart tells us. And it's like God gave us feelings for a reason. Like, God created feelings, but he also like they're also not supposed to control us. Like that's the point. Like anger can be justified, but if I act out of anger, that's a sin. Like you know, like so I think that's where it is hard with dating, because dating is like supposed to be from your heart. Like it's supposed to be emotional. But then when you let that get control, that's when like you're just feeding the flesh. And like we said, like that's never satisfied. So then that's when you get that endless cycle. But in light of talking about endless cycles, because that's really discouraging.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and end on something better. So any like encouragement, advice, or I think of like the application of all of this, because again, we are just kind of talking about the scary stuff and what makes all of this so hard. But there has to be an application to it.
Yeah. I do think I was listening to a sermon before this, and Haven actually listened to the same sermon. Yeah. And one thing that the pastor said, I cannot remember his name, was that something that we can take comfort in is the fact that Jesus has faced every single temptation that we have. He has faced temptation to have soul ties with people. He's faced temptations to do things that you're not supposed to do out of marriage. Like every single sin that you can think of, Jesus was tempted by that. But he didn't give in to it, and he died on the cross so that when we do fall into that sin, we are saved from it. So I take great comfort knowing that Jesus struggled with the things that I struggle with, and that there's grace in that, and there's love in that, and there's mercy in that, and it's just beautiful.
Absolutely.
I think you had mentioned something that reminded me of it earlier, but I also had written down was 1 Corinthians 6:16 also says that anyone joined in the Lord is one spirit with him. So as we're talking about, you know, Jesus experienced every temptation, which that's also a verse I have pinned up in my car.
Wow.
Like, because it is like, that's what at least I, like, when I first became a Christian, like a few years ago, like when I first came to my faith, like that's one thing I loved was the empathy of the Christian faith. Like Jesus did experience all of it. Like he was human. You know what I mean? Like, so then when you hear that, like when we think about soul ties, again, it's easy to think that they're dangerous, but we can also kind of emotionally be tied to our faith, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
Like that's one thing that I know for certain I want to be tied down to and anchored to is like Jesus and my faith. And then that's when soul ties look like a gift to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like the idea that I'm capable of being tied to something in a way that I can't even argue with because it's internal. Yeah. Like then that's a gift when I think about applying that to my faith. And it's hard. It's so much harder than it is to say, because again, it is against everything that you, like your natural responses. A lot of faith is like that. But, you know, if we can be tied to a really crappy boyfriend, like you can be tied to Jesus. Like,
well, and you get to look forward to one day, like if you do get married, like being tied to that person. It's a beautiful thing. It's the best thing other than salvation, obviously. But it's like the most beautiful thing, that the things that come from that tie to that person. The kids, the like all of it is just beautiful. So there are good things. That's encouraging
too, because I think like a lot of worldly examples of marriages I've seen are really scary, and they scare me out of like being excited for marriage. Like seeing, you know, instances where there isn't even like that full commitment there, and there isn't, you know, like that true love there. That's when it gets scary, because it's like then you're not emotionally tied to a person, you're not even fully committed to them, but you're sharing your life with them, your house, your kids. Like that's what's so scary.
Absolutely.
No, it's beautiful. I mean, it is scary. There are, it can be scary, I think, because of the spin that you said, like the world puts on it. But when it's done correctly and it's done the way that God intended,
it's the best.
It's the fire in the fireplace.
It's the fire in the fireplace.
How would you guys think about getting rid of a soul tie? Like if somebody does have one, like what should they do?
I think first pray, obviously. But I think you need to pray with a lot of intention and pray that God would put up safeguards, because God will. God doesn't allow us to go through temptation that he doesn't have a way for you to get out of. So when you pray for safeguards, I think it's important to remember that just because you pray for safeguards doesn't mean that if you're in the vicinity of that person, God's just like going to put a fence between the two of you. He's expecting you to do your part too, of like, well, don't put yourself in a situation with them. So I think that praying, finding an accountability partner, I think is really important. Being able to talk to somebody without judgment, but also somebody who's going to be honest with you, I think is really important.
Yeah.
Because then you have somebody that you can like talk to. Like it's not all up here, and it's not all with the person that you're tied to. You've brought in a third party, which can be very beneficial.
I also lied. I have another song quote.
Oh, yes.
But with that, the one last quote was, it says, it was talking about like the main subject of the song was like some girl, and it says that she's asking her friends for advice, but it says they're speaking from their flesh. Because like you're saying, having an accountability partner, like it is good to talk to friends about it, but then you have to think of who you're taking your advice from.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because again, like if everything in the world is telling us that there's nothing wrong with being emotionally close to a person without the commitment like marriage or something like that, then, you know, who's to say that most of the people you ask about it are going to be like, no, that's normal. Like my boyfriend and I talk about this and that and do this and that. And it's like, just because they do doesn't mean that they're doing it for the glory of God.
Right.
Like,
Absolutely.
you know, that's also, again, everything about this is hard. But it's like, you know, you want to do what's around you. Like, you want to follow the examples around you because all these people seem so happy. But the Bible is a long-term thing. I mean, the Bible tells you what your long-term is going to look like. I mean, even, like, beyond this life, it tells you what your long-term is going to look like. So it is hard to, to teach yourself to look beyond like the right now, like what's going to make me happy right now.
I was going to say that on that point, like don't just, like you're saying, don't just talk to your friends, don't talk to people around you, like break out of that group. When you're looking for advice, don't go to somebody who has the exact same amount of life experience as you. Go to someone who has more, like, and more good experience. Like find somebody who has been a Christian for a while, who's been walking this path, and who has maybe been through something similar to what you're going through, because they can help you. There is a verse in Proverbs, but I can't think of it, but it's like if you like don't surround yourself and just listen to, you know, the people in your friend group. Don't just listen to the people that are your age and the people that are going to make the same dumb decisions you're making and will affirm you in your dumb decisions because they're like, oh, I made it too, you know, it's okay. No, go to somebody who is gonna elevate you and who is going to challenge you and say, well, no, let's raise the standard. You know, let's not just be like everybody else. And this is why, like, because when you're just like everybody else, your marriage is going to fail. If you do the things that everyone else in this culture is doing, you're going to get the same result everyone is getting in this culture, and that's a divorce rate that's skyrocketing. So, like, hey, this ain't working. We got to find some other solution, and so go to somebody who's been in a long and happy marriage, who can talk to you about, you know, how to recover emotionally, and who can help you. And the first step, I think, is give it to Jesus, give it to the Lord. Seek wisdom from him and his word, and then go find somebody who's got some more experience than you and talk to them about it. And that provides accountability because you're talking about it, you're saying it to somebody, and it can be super beneficial for you because you can get some really good wisdom from people who are a little further down the road than you are. So. Yeah.
And I think also just knowing that regardless of decisions you've made, you're loved. If you bring it to Jesus, you're forgiven. And in the long run, it's all going to be okay.
I heard in the podcast that Elle and I both listened to that if you talk to somebody about it, your temptation goes down to do anything. So, and when you're trying to get rid of a soul tie, I would say the closer you run to God, the further away you'll get pulled from the soul tie. Like, the more you have a soul tie with God, the further you'll have a soul tie with anybody else. So, and just, like, setting boundaries. I think that's also what Ellen said. But, like, don't tempt yourself even more to go talk to the person or be around there. Or, like, just know where they are and just, like, kind of walk by them just to, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I think, yeah, it is like, if you're tempted to something, don't put it right in front of your face.
Don't push it, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I agree. And also, like you were saying, if you're trying to break a soul tie, like, the best thing you can do is run toward God.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's, like, in a lot of things, that's the only person I can think of that can break something that we can't, is God.
It is.
And I think it takes a lot of, like, it does take a lot of trust. And that's where it's like, yes, I know it's discouraging that you might be like listening to this right now and you're like, oh my gosh, like, do I have a soul tie to like my high school boyfriend right now? Like, this is terrible. But it is an opportunity to experience faith in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to experience having to trust God with something really painful and really like difficult. And I know it's hard to be like, this is painful and God's hand put me here.
Mm-hmm.
But this is painful and God's hand is also about to pull you out of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, think about testimonies and like, how do you, like, you know, how do people get like stronger? They work their muscles and it hurts and then you're stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So like, yeah, it's hard and it's discouraging, but it is a new opportunity to practice faith.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
For sure.
I think it does take a lot of time
Yeah.
to get rid of a soul tie.
Mm.
Like, I don't know, just put your trust in God, and then
Yeah.
His time will come.
The
Yeah.
crown of thorns hair tie.
Yes. Crown of Thorns hair tie.
Crown of thorns hair tie.
Well, I hope that everybody finds their Crown of Thorns hair tie.
Playfully sacrilegious, you know?
No.
Just
On that note,
feel like
It's just like, anybody have any comments that's not about Crown of Thorn hair tie?
See, I feel like I'm
That's
not
all
allowed
I
to
would
say
have.
anything. I can't.
See, now, you're telling me not to think about it.
Yeah, and that's all
Okay.
I'm thinking about. It's
Well, I
like
think
Jesus
that-
with a man bun and a crown of thorns hair tie.
Okay, I think that concludes the episode 12. I think this is
12.
episode 12.
Of the
Wow.
For the Youth podcast.
Wow.
Episode 12
Can you
for these
believe it?
podcasts, Soul Ties. That's it. Thank you guys so much for listening through everything, Crown of Thorns hair tie and all. Thank you, and we'll see you for the next episode.
Woo!
Bye.
Bye.